I believe it. I moved my family to this town because I believe in this town. And that is to say, it is cool to be from Dayton, right? You should be proud of that. There are reasons for you to be proud of being from Dayton, right? Do not apologize for that. Do not make excuses for being from Dayton. We will kick your fucking ass, right? Period.
Welcome back to Fretboard TV. Happy New Year, everyone. It's really good to be back. We took a little bit of time off during the December season, and we're here with John from Warped Wing Brewmaster, or Brewmeister, as they would say in Germany, but also co-founder and partner at Warped Wing Brewery in Dayton. So John Haggerty, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And then
coming
we
out,
have
John.
My pleasure.
Kevin Moreland, our Brewmeister. And production manager over at Fretboard, and also partner of mine as well. So we appreciate you both coming out. Obviously, we got you here for a reason, because we're doing a collaboration beer. Fretboard's going to be doing a collaboration beer with Warped Wing, and that's why you're here today. First, let me get into a little bit about your history, John. So you were telling me before the show started that you actually went to Germany for school. And studied over in Germany. Now, how long of a stint was that? And
that was about a year. About a year.
Yeah. And you said it was just after September 11th, which has got to be a little strange too.
Yeah, I was over there from like October of '01 until June, July of '02. So it was good. It was an interesting time. Anybody that's lived or traveled overseas knows that you become an ambassador for your country, whether you want to be or not.
Sure.
When you're over there, and it was an interesting time to be there, as everyone, is aware of what happened in September of 2001. So having to answer those questions about what was going on and what we were doing in Afghanistan and Iran or Iraq rather. Sorry. So it was interesting. It was an interesting place to be during that time. Not to mention the beer.
So prior to studying in Germany, you were telling me you got your start. You're originally from Indianapolis. You moved out to Seattle. You were at a brew pub. You're bugging the guy, the brewmaster out there to teach you.
I was working in the kitchen and a little bit bar backing at this brew pub called the Big Time Brewery, which still exists. Is still there in the University District in Seattle. But the guy at the time, his name is Ed Tringali. Ed's still around too. Ed does a lot of consulting in Asia nowadays. And so I used to bug the crap out of him. I'm working in the kitchen and I'm like, well, if I'm going to work here, I might as well learn how to do something cool like make beer, right? So I started bugging Ed. I'm like, hey, yo, Ed, when are you going to hire me into the brewery? I want to work in the brewery, right? I want to get out of the kitchen.
That's where the cool shit is.
Right. And so, literally, this went on, I don't know, 6 months, 8 months, where I'd come to work and I'd see Ed and I'd be like, hey, yo, Ed, right? Every day, right? He had
persistent.
He had to have gotten to the point where he's just like, oh my God, here comes that dude again. I gotta get away from this guy. But eventually he gave me an opportunity. It worked out, right?
Better, you're just annoying, whatever.
I wore him down for sure. Yeah.
So from there you were out in Seattle. How long were you in Seattle? Did you stay there, or did you bounce around?
I was there for about 4 years, and then I left there because I was young, and young people do things that they probably shouldn't do, and so I sold everything I owned, which was worth about $1.75, and I packed everything into a backpack, and I went to Asia for a year.
Oh, no kidding. Okay.
Backpacked around Asia, and then when I came back, I ended up moving to Wisconsin and got a job working in a brewery there, Great Dane, which is in Madison, which is still there and doing quite well. Did some work with Rob Labreglio, great dude. Worked with them for a couple of years, and then up to Minnesota. These guys hired me to build their brew pub for them. They're called the Town Hall, which is in, they've got a couple of locations now, but it's a brew pub in Seven Corners, the original one. And then eventually it was like, well, if I'm going to do this as a living, what I kind of realized when I was working for Pete was that in order for me to make the kind of living that I wanted, I had to be able to help sell more beer. And in a brew pub setting, you were kind of confined to the four walls, particularly due to the legislative environment that existed in Minnesota at the time. And so I was like, I got to get some production brewing experience. So I went and I worked for this group called Minnesota Brewing Company, and we made beers like Grain Belt and Pig's Eye and so forth that were our own brands. This guy, Sig Plagans, was the brewmaster when I got hired there, and then he retired, and then Phil Gagne took over. Tom Clark. It was a great place. We did a lot of contracts for big brewers like Sam Adams and Pete's Wicked Ale. And
how big was the brew house?
That was an 800 barrel brew house.
Serious amount of liquid?
It was big. I mean, we would run, one of my jobs when I first started was running the industrial filter. This guy Butch taught me how to run the industrial filter.
Butch running the filter.
And the filter used to run
right.
at like 350 barrels of beer an hour.
Holy cow.
Right? And it's like, I only made 700 barrels of beer in the brew pub the previous year. Right? And so in 2 hours worth of work, I've processed more beer than I made the whole previous year. Right? And at first that sort of freaks you out, right? Because you're like, oh my God, I hope I don't fuck this up, right? Fortunately, I didn't. But there were some interesting stories that came out of working there. But it was a great experience, right? And that sort of, that set the stage for me to go to Germany and go on from there and help run some production companies.
Well, now, was that prior to you going to Germany?
That was immediately before I went to Germany. Yeah, I left there in order to do that. And in fact, they had offered me a job when I was working there. I was a shift brewer, and I was in the union because there were such things as union breweries at one point. There's probably still a few out there. But they had offered me an opportunity to move into the management role. They were kind of starting to talk to me about that, but it's like, Germany, it's like, I think I want to go to Germany. So I split.
That's a good choice.
I think it was. Retrospectively, it worked out because while I was in Germany, that brewery closed.
Yeah, so
it worked out.
No kidding. All right.
Yeah, so it worked out.
That was a good decision then.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Then did New Holland then
so then when I came back from Germany, my folks had moved from the Indianapolis area up to the Detroit area for various reasons. And, I wanted to get closer to them for a couple of different reasons. From a selfish perspective, because I was tired of using all my vacation time to go visit my mom and dad.
Sure.
It's like, I want to go on vacation someplace for real, right? And so it's like, man, it'd be great if I could live within a drive of them. So I was really focusing hard on Michigan when I was coming back from Germany. I happened to run into these guys from New Holland. They weren't really even advertising the job. There was another guy, his name's Dennis Holland, as a matter of fact, that was running a brewery in Grand Rapids that I knew from Washington. And somehow my resume ended up on his desk, and so he reached out to me and said, hey, you should call these guys at New Holland because they're looking for somebody. And so I did, and that worked out, and I ended up working there for almost 10 years.
And that runs you into the time frame when you really got started with Warped Wing, right?
Yeah,
is that correct?
Yeah, so I left there in 2012. I did some consulting work, and I was working with an equipment group called Craftwork, which was based out of Detroit. And that's when the Warped Wing guys came to me. They were trying to get that project going. And there were three guys originally, Mike and Joe and Nick. And between the three of them, they had finance and sales and marketing and experience and so forth. And so they came to me and they're like, hey, look, we're trying to do this. We need somebody that knows how to make beer, right? And it's like, yeah, it's hard to have a brewery without that.
That sounds like a familiar story.
Yeah. So I came down to, I knew the one guy.
That's a song we know.
Personally speaking, I understand that.
I knew the one guy, Joe, from around the industry because Joe'd been in beer for a long time. And so he was the guy that approached me. And so I came down to Dayton and met the other guys and kind of checked out Dayton, see if I thought the project would go. And then do I think my family would be happy living here? And the answer to both of those questions was yes. And so I ran up to Flagpole with my wife, and we decided we're gonna roll the dice with this project and see how it goes, and we have, and so far so good.
When did you start the project with Warped Wing and the guys?
That was in 2013. We started doing build out and had all our financing and so forth, and then we opened the tap room to the public in January of 14. So really, like, what's today, 26th or something
Yes.
of January. I mean, it is almost exactly 7 years.
So if you can choose a beer that you're probably most proud of at Warped Wing, is it a lager, or is it or is it Gamma Bomb, or is it something that's based on sale rate, or is it something personally that you say, I love this beer, I love this style?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because there's a lot of ways you could cut it. I love the Superba and I love the Trotwood. I drink both of those a lot. In fact, at home I always have a 6 or 12 pack of Trotwood in my refrigerator because it's just such a nice warm weather beer and easy drinking. And in terms of like weirdness and creativity and so forth, we did this beer called Pirogue. I think I got one here.
Yeah, I think there's one down there.
It's this one right here. We haven't made this beer in a couple years. This one was aged in a barrel. It's a black triple, right? So there's a coffee shop and coffee roaster up in Dayton called the coffee shop's called Press, and the roaster is called Woodboro. But it's the same guy. His name's Brett Barker, and Brett and I did a lot of talking about that particular beer. He didn't want to do a black coffee beer. We were going to do this coffee collaboration, right? He didn't want to do a black beer because everybody's coffee beer is black, right? So I'm like, oh Jesus, okay, what am I going to do that's not black? And so I started thinking about, well, when do you take coffee, right? Well, you take coffee in the morning with like breakfast and wake up and so on and so forth. Sometimes you take coffee at night, like with dessert. So I'm like, okay, let's go with a dessert angle. But with dessert, I started thinking, well, what could I do that's like a beer flavor? And so I started thinking about like Bananas Foster and so forth, and what beer styles have banana as a flavor? Because maybe I can like connect that banana flavor to the coffee. And so I'm like, okay, let's do a Belgian triple with coffee that's yellow, that's not black. That's going to make Brett happy.
You're making me thirsty.
Yeah. Yeah. So I go and pitch it to my partners, and I'm like, hey, we're going to make this Belgian triple with coffee.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, we can't sell that. They couldn't get their heads around it, right? Because it's a yellow beer with coffee. They're like, no, we can't do that. So then I'm like, Jesus. Actually, I said a different word. It started with F. What am I going to do now? Because I just spent all this time thinking that up, and I think it's a good idea. And where do I go now? I got to start all over. And then I was like, well, wait a minute. People made IPA black. Why can't I make the triple black? Right? I could just make a black triple, and then that'll make the salespeople happy, and that'll make the coffee guy. Well, it's still black, so he's not super happy, but it's a different flavor profile than stout or porter or whatever. So I'm like, maybe that's the thing, and so we did it, and it turned out really great. And it's a really funny beer, right? You'd have it on the chalkboard, you'd have it on tap, right? And people would be reluctant to order it because they're like, black triple with coffee. You'd put it in front of people, here, try this, and they drink it, and they're like, holy shit, right? And it's like, yeah.
Got the oh shit moment?
Yeah, and they're like, I wasn't going to order that beer because I didn't really know what to expect from it, right? Because it's so off the map. But then they try it, and it's like, okay. But it works. So I've got a lot of pride in that beer, too. And all of them, really. But
those
are
two
a couple.
stand out.
Yeah, those two stand out for different reasons. So.
Well, you asked a question on how our relationship and how this whole thing started. Honestly, again, I'll go back to some of my history in Cincinnati. When I was just getting into beer, obviously as a home brewer, I think I was a little, above the curve when it started to craft beer to blow up. I was a little before that, and as I was, getting in as a home brewer, I was drinking all kinds of different beers, right? And I would say at that point, John at that point was with New Holland, and I ran into a couple of their reps. I knew as I was dealing with some of the distributors and building some relationships to get where I wanted to be in my future, I started to hear John's name and centered around some of the brands that were coming out from New Holland. Because when I was at that point, I was a beer buyer, one of my first jobs in the industry, and I was buying New Holland over in Kentucky because I took a job. I needed to learn how to the ways of the world of buying beer and the distribution chains of beer. And at one point, I met one of John's colleagues from New Holland, and I was asking about the brewer, the beers, and John's name
Who's that,
come up.
Clay?
Yeah. So at that point, I would travel to just as fun to Great American Beer Festival, and John don't even know this, but I would always go around to people's booth, and at one point in time, which we've never talked about, John was there and he was judging probably at that point, and he was at the booth for New Holland, and I tried the beers, and that's where my first kind of relationship with just knowing who he was, what he was about, and that's going back a little way. So as I started to develop my skills and getting into beer, I started to run into John at all of, like, you name it, beer festivals around the country. Like, we started to see each other. I really got to know Nick, his partner, and I knew some of the other partners that helped start the business. And I'm like, we always see each other, and he's 40 minutes up the road.
Yeah.
And I called John up and I said, John, we're coming to Dayton. I'd really love for you to brew a beer with us and just help us launch Dayton, and just come down and let's have a good day and brew some beer, man.
What style you guys brewing today?
What I intended was, we're going into a new market. We have had beer in Dayton. He is a Dayton brewery, and when I was looking at portfolios, and I put some thought into it, obviously I love data, and I just love to see what people are drinking around the United States, regardless if it's craft beer or what it is. So I really wanted the two brands to merge as one, as a true collaboration. And what was so cool is John is hugely into music. Who doesn't like music in flight? I mean, I always got my headphones on the airplane.
I love getting high.
Yeah.
I mean, an airplane.
So obviously, I'm like, how do we put those two things together? We worked with our team, our marketing team, all of our owners, and we sat in a room and we're like, how do we merge these two brands? And what came out of it was gold-plated Jet. Jet is a reference to a guitar, a brand. Jet is also a reference to their brand and flight. Jet also is a Wing song from awesome, Paul McCartney. And we added the gold-plated thing as, we're not just coming out with any any guitar or any brand. It's got to be a gold-plated Jet, right?
Yeah.
So, and just honestly, it stinted off of the name first for me. So when I pitched it over to John, I'm like, I sent like 3 styles. I said, what do you think? He's like, Kevin, all those sound great.
Sorry.
So did Kevin choose, or did
Kevin chose mostly, but I couldn't argue with any of the logic, which was like, look, I want to make something that's sessionable and drinkable, and you can have multiples of, with a little bit of hop character in it, so it has some twist to it, and it's like, I mean, that's exactly the kind of beer that I love to drink. I mean, that's what I want.
So what is it officially? It's a golden ale.
Golden ale with Lotus hops. So
with Lotus hops.
And I know you did some test work on those Lotus hops when they were still in experimental phase, and we did too. We've used those before, and it's like, sounds great.
So I'm like, all right, Dayton, our brand, his brand. I know his style. I know what he likes. We just did a lager. We just released another lager. I love lager, but what's that craft consumer going to appreciate from our two brands? And I'm like, golden ale that's not over the top, 4.5% alcohol, 10 IBUs.
10 IBUs, okay.
We're going to use German hops to actually bitter, which I normally don't do for any of our beers besides our German lagers.
Yeah, but it's nice, right? Because the people don't think a lot about bitterness, or the consumer doesn't think a lot about bitterness. But there is a difference in quality,
of course,
in bitterness between an American hop and a German hop, and it's a question of refinement, right? The bitterness tends to be broader and more brash if you're using an American hop, and it tends to be more reserved and more refined if you're using a German hop. And
subtle.
It's hard to explain to somebody until you taste them right next to each other.
It may be called golden ale, And I would tell you 90% of probably golden ales that are brewed in the U.S. they probably don't use German hops to bitter.
No.
And they probably don't use Lotus,
No.
which Lotus has this bouquet of orange and vanilla and a little, citrus. So we used an English malt and some English yeast for this beer, which we don't do here. So that's a whole nother spectrum to the beer that's going to give some fruity character to the beer from the yeast perspective. And then we use Golden Promise, which to me it's one of the most underrated malts out there.
It's a great malt, yeah.
It's
a little pricey.
Yeah, it's a little pricey, but it has the character.
Yeah, it's a nice malt.
But I believe the people, when they finally get to taste the beer, they're going to just gravitate to it because they're not going to get 7.5% with all these hops and the bitterness. I think they're going to get a flavor, nice 4.5% beer that they will enjoy for you.
It doesn't sound like a standard simple golden ale though. I mean, you've got a lot of things going on. I mean, you've got quite a few malts and oats and different styles of hops that you normally wouldn't use. So
I need to call a timeout. This is getting edited, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I need to call timeout because I'm about to piss myself.
Oh, okay.
I gotta go hit the
I was
head
going to
real
take I was going to take a break.
I'm sorry.
So no, go for it.
I got to do it. I couldn't wait any longer.
Before we get into music, I did want to talk to you a little bit about the production brewery. It's the old Buckeye Iron and Glassworks foundry.
Yep.
And you're in the Oregon district, obviously in a historic area. Talk a little bit about the building itself, why that building, how you came upon it.
Yeah, well, the building, as you said, the building was originally built as a foundry, and so it has fairly high ceilings. And at the time that it was built, back in the 30s, they put a lot of glass block in order to let light into the building, which was considered to be a positive. As time went by, most sort of industrial buildings were sort of closed up and windowless because there were insurance reasons, and so it led to this design in industrial buildings without windows, which it is a shame, because having worked in a number of buildings of that nature, not having access to natural light during the day is mentally draining, but that's an aside. We hadn't yet signed the deal for that building, and we were looking at other stuff, and I just remember going in there and thinking, man, I could work in this building, right? Because the light in this building was awesome. I've worked in so many buildings.
Do you have skylights too?
No, there's no skylights.
Some of the old buildings have that. Yeah. I'm just going to ask. So
no, the roof it's a concrete roof, right? First of all, which is the thing's like a bomb shelter, right? But it's a concrete roof. But when you look at the concrete, you'll see in the concrete like a wood pattern, because when they built it, they had a wood frame that they poured the concrete on, and it left its grain pattern in the concrete that's up there.
That's cool.
Yeah, I mean,
He said roof,
beautiful.
And I say roof.
Yeah.
Is that, where are you from again?
Indianapolis.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm civilized. Look, you're from Appalachia, man. I can't help you.
No, Kevin's from Norwood.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, well, same thing.
Yeah.
Look, if you got less
country.
than, well, never mind. Like when I worked at Min Brew, we spent a fair amount of time talking about that. I mean, you'd be in cellars like 2 or 3 stories beneath the ground. There's no light.
Yeah.
You're
walking
you got
in tunnels.
fluorescent lamps and stuff, and it's depressing.
I was going to say the funny thing is, maybe Kevin doesn't even know this, but as the HR guy, the request I've gotten is to install windows over in our production area.
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge thing, and I don't think it's given enough credence, like how much natural light impacts your mood and your state of mind, right?
Yeah.
And so we have this building, and it's like, man, I could work in this building, right? And I remember distinctly mashing in for like the first time, because it was like December. We opened in January of 14, right? So like December of 13. I've got the equipment in, and I'm starting to do the first brew, and I'm in the building by myself. It's super early in the morning, like 7:30 a.m. or something, and nobody else is there. And I'm mashing in, and the building faces east and west, and there's this ring of sort of glass block that goes around about 20 feet up off the floor. And when you're mashing in, you're facing east when you're standing on the brew deck, and the sun is rising in the southeast. And I got Donovan playing on the stereo, and I got steam coming off the mash tun, and I got this bready aroma from the malt getting mashed in.
Donovan.
And the sun's coming up, and it's hitting the glass block, and it's turning this crazy yellow, orange, pink color. And I'm just thinking, man, it doesn't get better than this.
What do you like most, I guess, about your brand in particular, about what you do with that that homage to Dayton history? What's some of your, what's some of your favorites, I guess?
There's a couple things at play here, right? In the first thing and the most obvious is, craft beer is part of a larger food movement. Whether that be coffee or asparagus or cheeseburgers or whatever, right? We live in a time where people are really interested in sort of this farm to table sort of movement, and they want to know the people that are making their stuff, right? The closer relationship they have with you or with me, the better they feel about what it is they're buying. As a craft brewer, I'm trying to appeal to your sense of place, first and foremost, right? I am your neighbor. I live next door to you. My staff lives next door to you. I want you to understand that I have a sense of who it is you are. The second thing is, and I noticed this a long time ago because I went to college in Southwest Ohio at Miami. And so even though I wasn't from Ohio, I came over from Indiana. I knew a lot of people from Cincinnati, Dayton, Toledo, Cleveland, Columbus, Akron, wherever. And so you knew there was a sense of pride about where these people were from. They all loved their hometown, just as I did in Indianapolis and in Indiana. And there's certain aspects of Indiana that I still ascribe to that I love about Dayton, because in some way, like, Ohio's a football state, but Dayton's a basketball town.
Oh yeah,
sure.
Right? And I'm a basketball guy because I'm from Indiana, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a part of Dayton that feels like Indiana to me, right? Because of the way they embrace basketball, right? And I love that. But the point being is this, and that is, I met a lot of people from Dayton, and you would ask them, where are you from? And they would say, we're from Cincinnati. And it's like, really? Where? Where in Cincinnati are you from? Oh, Dayton. And it's like, look, Dayton is not a suburb of Cincinnati, right? Dayton is its own city. And one of the things that we intentionally did, and continue to do and believe in, this isn't just some hyperbole to try to get you to buy beer. I mean, I believe it. I moved my family to this town because I believe in this town. And that is to say, it is cool to be from Dayton, right? You should be proud of that. There are reasons for you to be proud of being from Dayton, right? Do not apologize for that. Do not make excuses for being from Dayton. We will kick your fucking ass, right? Period.
That's also the intro.
Right. As far as Dayton was concerned, we were the first ones to take that stance and say, you know what, we're planting our flag in Dayton, and we are happy to be from Dayton. We are proud to be from Dayton, and we think that you should be too, right? Most other companies that were based in Dayton weren't trying to say, hey, Dayton's awesome and cool, and you should be proud of being from Dayton. We were the first one to come in and say, hey, look, yes, you should be, because Dayton's awesome. Look at all the stuff that Dayton has contributed to the world, right? Because it is significant. I like to think of local as Ohio, right? And it sort of goes out from there. If you live in Dayton, should you buy Fretboard beer? Yeah, absolutely. They're local. They're from Cincinnati, right? If you're in Cincinnati, should you buy Warped Wing beer? Yes, absolutely. They're from Dayton. We're all in Ohio together. We should all be supporting each other, right? And then we will take over the world from there.
Let's get into music.
All right, let's go. Music.
It's a long episode.
You'll have Mitch is going to have a lot.
Mitch has got a lot of editing.
You got some work to do. Yeah.
So let's start here. First record you remember as a kid?
So when I was a kid, and when I was in the second grade, so I was like 7 years old, right? First album I ever bought, I asked my parents.
As a second grader?
Yeah.
Wow.
My parents
That's no
got it
joke.
for me. Jim Croce's Greatest Hits, because I was a fan of Bad Bad Leroy Brown, right?
That's a good one.
And so I had this album, and I had it in my possession until I was like 35 years old, or I mean, from the second grade. I mean, it had it for like 3 decades, and then someone stole it out of my apartment and gone. You know, when I was in, so I'm a child of the 80s, really, and because I went to high school from like 83 to 87. You know, Eddie Van Halen was the man. We were talking about that earlier.
Yeah.
You know, like when you hear a Van Halen tune come on, I mean, you know it from like the first note of the guitar.
Yes.
Right? Eddie's sound is just iconic. We were talking about that in terms of the brewery and how yeast and water profiles define, you know, your house flavor and so forth. And I think it's important that you have that. You know, Van Halen had that. Led Zeppelin has that. You know, the Beatles have that. The Rolling Stones have. I mean, you know it. The second you hear it, you're like, oh, that's this group. You know, I like piano, right? I like Thelonious Monk. I like James Booker, the Bayou Maharaja. I like Professor Longhair. I like McCoy Tyner. You know, I like these different piano players too. I think piano is interesting. I've been giving my kid piano. I haven't been giving him. I've been paying for lessons for him, and I'm trying to get him to like listen to these different guys because I think it's important.
Yeah.
Right.
Sounds.
Well, yeah, in the way you think about texture orally, meaning hearing, and texture and flavor, and texture in the way that you touch things. So your sense, you got to develop all of those senses because it just enriches your life. I mean, whether you make a living out of that or not, if you're awake, right, and you're paying attention to your different senses, because we get so dominated with sight, TV and computer and so forth, and we lose sight of hearing and smelling and tasting. I think there's value in that, right? Because we get so desensitized to it because the TV or the radio is telling us this is what you should like all the time so that you don't have to think about it. And it's like, no. Time out. You absolutely 100% have to think about it. You have to taste it, you have to smell it, you have to think about it, and you have to decide for yourself whether you like it or not. The TV doesn't get to tell you, right? I mean, that's the crux of what we do, right? We're trying to turn people on, wake them back up.
All right, this question's from Mitch. Imagine you're a professional wrestler. One of Warped Wing's beers would have to be part of your character's name.
Yeah.
So that's key. What would that name be, and what's that walkout song?
The song part's easy. The other part is harder, and so up yours, Mitch. Thank you for making my life difficult.
Yeah, he's the creative guy.
I'm going to tell you right now, and I knew it as soon as I read it. When my wife and I got married, we'd been together for a while, and in fact, our son was, I think, 7 years old when we got married. So we knew each other pretty well, and so she gave me a little bit of latitude on the music list. But we played 20th Century Boy by T-Rex as our intro from our wedding to our reception, right? And that would be my music.
That's the walkout song.
That's the walkout song, because that power riff on the intro is awesome, right? I mean, that's just great power chord, loud. Let's go. The beer name is the hard part. I'm not sure what name I would pick, but if I were going to model my character after an existing WWF or WWE character, Randy Macho Man Savage. I mean,
there we go.
How do you pick anybody else, right? Particularly if you're going to pick Mark Bolan and T-Rex as your intro music. I mean, you got Bolas and you got T-Rex. Right, I mean, it's perfect.
Oh yeah.
But,
oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I don't know, maybe like Johnny Superba, And maybe you like jump off the top rung, like Jimmy Superfly,
I like it.
right?
You're naming
I
some
don't know.
good ones.
Yeah.
You're stuck on an island with any one band's full discography and
Okay.
one brewery's beer other than Warped Wing.
Gotcha.
What band artists
So
and what
all their
brewery are you
music
choosing?
and all their beer.
Yeah.
One band, one brewery.
Well, we'll take these one at a time. So part of the issue also is, am I on the island by myself? Or am I on
No,
the
you're on
island?
the island by yourself.
I'm not by myself?
You're by yourself.
No, I'm by myself. You
You're
sure?
by
Because it didn't
yourself.
say that in the question.
Is it? I'm getting
He's by himself.
Stones. I got to go Stones.
right.
I was-
Stones.
I was
Because
gonna say,
there's a lot of albums.
Stones, they have a lot of albums, and they've got a really broad sound spectrum, right? Like one of my
Energy.
favorite Stones albums is Some Girls, which is like country and western,
All right.
right? So I'm going Stones. Stones. I almost went Miles Davis, but I'm going to go Stones.
Brewery.
I could, we were talking about Keysmont earlier, and
Yeah.
I could probably honestly drink Heron Pills for the rest of my life and be happy. But I'm going to go Sierra because I think,
Sierra Nevada?
I
We're
love
friends now.
What other Sierra is there?
Yes. There is no other Sierra.
All right, you get to book music on the Fretboard stage.
Oh, yeah.
For one ultimate experience.
Yeah.
Pick any 3 bands, past, present, dead or alive, to perform in order, open to close.
Yeah. I gave this one some thought. Now, the first thing I got to say is that it's got to be a good live show, right? This isn't about like the discography and what you've recorded.
Right on.
This is about how well do you perform,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Because if I'm coming to see you, it better be a party,
Awesome.
right? And so I think my ideal 3-band show would be first opening band. And I had to debate between MC5 and Iggy Pop and the Stooges, but I think I'm going Iggy Pop and the Stooges,
Wow.
right? Because I
Okay.
think it's a short set. Maybe you got like 30 to 45 minutes. It's loud, it's powerful, it's energetic. Boom.
Getting your ass out of the seat.
Second set, Beastie Boys.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, let's go.
Those guys did some really great, almost jazz-like stuff. And they're great musicians, they're great songwriters, great energy. And then, right, the headliner, it's got to be, we were talking about earlier, George Clinton, Parliament Funkadelic. It's got to be. I mean, it is just,
That's
it's the
the
best
party.
show I've ever seen. It's the best part. I mean, you put those 3 bands back to back to back, I don't think you're going to sit down
No.
for like 4 or 5 hours.
You ain't going to work after that
Right.
the next day.
Right. And it's like, I can't imagine a better show. And even though none of those bands really are the same genre, they have enough in common. There's a thread there between all of them. And it's just like, I think
like,
that's
wow.
the show.
No, that's great.
I'm ready to go to that one.
That's a hell of a show.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna we're gonna end here because we it's been a great time on John.
Yeah, thank you for having
so
me.
much.
Yeah.
Thanks
thanks
coming
so
down.
much, Kevin. Thanks.
Yeah.
A little bit about the beer, Kev. Do you want to talk about timelines?
Yeah, so we're brewing first batch today. We got another batch getting ready to go in the tanks as me and John are supervising from the tables
Oh,
right
you can
now.
see it.
Sure.
Right.
Supervising.
Add the hops now.
We've got canning scheduled next week.
Okay.
I would look for the first week or 2 of February for a release. Folks up in Dayton, look for it. Your local retailers. We're trying to work out some details to try and get some of the guys from the brewery and some of us to come up and visit Warped Wing and have some beer on draft. Look for it in their tap rooms. Everybody stay strong out there and support local as much as you can. It helps us all. So,
Yeah. Kevin, thanks for having me, man.
no,
Appreciate
no
it.
problem,
Absolutely.
John. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
I'm out of beer. We
Yeah,
gotta fix that.
me too.
I've got a swivel left.
All right.
Thank you.